Imagine stepping off a luxury cruise in dazzling Juneau, Alaska, surrounded by glacial peaks and endless wilderness. It's Tuesday, July 1st, and Marites Buenafe, a 62-year-old physician from Kentucky aboard the Norwegian Bliss, sends a casual text to her family. She's riding the Mount Roberts tramway, planning to hike Gold Ridge toward Gastineau Peak. Moments later, she's captured on camera at the tram's summit, then vanishes. This isn't just a missing person case. It's a real-life detective thriller. A solo traveler gone missing in brutal terrain, a sudden disappearance, and a haunting discovery far off the trail. People will stop scrolling to see what comes next. It was a crisp morning on Tuesday, July 1st, just after 7:30, when 62-year-old Dr. Marites Buenafe disembarked from the Norwegian Bliss in Juneau, Alaska. Her plan was straightforward: ride the Mount Roberts tramway, then trek along Gold Ridge toward Gastineau Peak, a popular hiking path with sweeping views of the Gastineau Channel. She sent her family a quick text confirming her itinerary. Security cameras captured her at the tram's summit around the same time. No sign of hesitation, no hint of trouble. She looked ready, confident, prepared to enjoy a solo adventure. But as the clock ticked toward the ship's 1:30 p.m. departure, she hadn't returned. The crew waited and waited. Finally, as the Bliss's departure deadline passed, alarm bells went off. By 3:20 in the afternoon, the Juneau police logged her as missing. She was alone in rugged terrain, no hiking partner, no guide, and no immediate trace left behind. And just like that, a routine day ashore became a full-blown search and rescue operation. Echoes of her last known moment, the tram ride, the trail's edge, now served as the launching point for a desperate dash into the Alaskan wilderness. By 3:30 that afternoon, once the Norwegian Bliss had departed without her, the case shifted from a delay to a potential disaster. Local authorities, led by the Juneau Police Department and Alaska Wildlife Troopers, launched a full-scale search. This wasn't a casual sweep. It was a tactical rescue mission across unforgiving terrain. The skies were scanned by helicopters from the Alaska Wildlife Troopers and the U.S. Coast Guard. Thermal drones buzzed through the clouds, attempting to cut through the canopy with heat detection. K-9 teams combed the base of Mount Roberts, and soon Juneau Mountain Rescue volunteers, seasoned hikers, and technical climbers joined in. They moved through dense brush, sharp elevation changes, and mud-slick trails, knowing that every passing hour was critical. But darkness and fog forced the aerial searches to pause. On foot, the teams kept pushing forward through the mist. The rain began to fall. Visibility dropped. Hope, for some, began to fade. Then, on the morning of Thursday, July 3rd, nearly 48 hours since she vanished, a National Guard helicopter spotted something. On the steep side of Mount Roberts, far below the ridge, they located a figure lying motionless. It was a woman. The body was found 1,700 feet below the trail she was believed to be walking. The recovery wasn't easy. The slope was treacherous and the brush thick, but they brought her back. The missing woman had been found. What they didn't find was her story. The moment her body was spotted, just before noon on Thursday, July 3rd, the urgency shifted from hope to heartbreak. She was found lying motionless on the steep southeastern face of Mount Roberts, 1,700 feet below the trail she was expected to follow. There were no footprints leading to her, no broken brush to show how she had descended, no sign that anyone had seen it happen. She was alone, tucked into the wild slope, as if the mountain itself had hidden her. The terrain was ruthless, nearly vertical, covered in slick stone and thick evergreens. A combined recovery team from Juneau Mountain Rescue, the Alaska National Guard, and Temsco helicopters worked for hours in rain and low clouds to reach her. It wasn't just physically dangerous, it was emotionally brutal. What they found offered no explanation, no visible wounds, no gear left behind, no final message. Once recovered, her remains were transferred to Alaska State Troopers, then to the state medical examiner for autopsy. The cruise company issued a brief statement expressing condolences, noting that their care team was supporting her family. But the words felt thin against the weight of what had just happened. A woman had vanished from a known trail in broad daylight and been found days later, nearly half a mile down the mountain, with no witnesses, no warning, and no clear cause. It was the end of the search. But it was only the beginning of the questions. After her body was flown to Juneau and then on to the state medical examiner, the Alaska State Troopers released a concise bulletin. This appears to be a tragic accident. The terrain is treacherous, they said, and wildlife has not been ruled out. There is no evidence of foul play, no signs of struggle, no personal items missing, no witnesses to suggest something sinister. But the silence in their wording speaks volumes. They did not mention an official cause of death, yet no confirmation of blunt force trauma, no ruling lapse into hypothermia or exposure. They've simply stated that all evidence currently supports accidental death, and that the investigation remains open pending the full autopsy report. Meanwhile, the cruise line echoed those sentiments, offering condolences and stating that they have fully cooperated with authorities but expressed no clear stance on what exactly happened. Their priority appears to be compassion and keeping the channel open with the family. Here's what we know for sure: she was experienced, had no known health conditions, and brought appropriate gear. Yet she ended up 1,700 feet below the trail, with absolutely no footprints leading to her body. No scramble marks, no aerial evidence of a slide or rockfall, just a woman, lost somewhere between confidence and calamity. So the big questions loom long in the cold Alaskan wind. Did a sudden slip send her off the trail in a split second? Could she have slipped while trying to avoid wildlife? Or are we seeing the surface assessment of a deeper, still concealed truth? As the autopsy awaits and toxicology tests take their time, this story stands at a crossroads: accident or a deeper mystery waiting to be uncovered. Known to her family and colleagues as a passionate, experienced solo traveler, Dr. Marites Buenafe was a 62-year-old physician from Kentucky. She had spent decades caring for patients and in recent years had embraced independent travel as her passion, always well prepared, always cautious, always respectful of safety protocols. Before booking the Norwegian Bliss cruise to Alaska, she had hiked in national parks across the United States, from the Grand Canyon to Yosemite, frequently hiking alone. Friends described her as self-reliant, well-equipped, and level-headed, a seasoned adventurer who knew how to read a weather forecast and respect changing terrain. She notified her family of her plan early that morning, taking the Mount Roberts tramway, then hiking the Gold Ridge Trail. Her text was calm, confident, typical of her solo explorer style. There were no physical or mental health concerns disclosed, no signs she was unprepared, and no reason to suspect she'd take unnecessary risks. Still, she ended up 1,700 feet below that trail, silent and unseen. A woman who knew what she was doing, and yet something went drastically, tragically wrong. As the investigation continues, her professional dedication and disciplined mindset add a chilling contrast. This wasn't an impulsive thrill seeker. This was someone who knew the mountain, and yet it swallowed her whole. Now we enter the part of the story where certainty ends and speculation begins. There are no witnesses, no video, no final message. Only a woman's body found 1,700 feet below a known trail, and the trail itself, well traveled, scenic, not considered deadly unless something goes very wrong. One theory is the simplest: she slipped. Gold Ridge is known for its slick gravel and narrow ledges, especially after rainfall. One misplaced step could have triggered a devastating fall, especially if she ventured close to the edge for a photo or simply lost her footing. Another possibility: she got disoriented. Though experienced, even seasoned hikers can veer off course in fog, sudden weather changes, or if they unknowingly leave the main path. Mount Roberts holds patches of melting snow, even in July, slick, deceptive, and easy to misjudge. If she strayed into one of those areas, the terrain may have turned against her. There's also the wildlife angle. Bears, moose, and even wolves inhabit that mountain. Could she have been startled, forced off the trail in a rush to escape? That might explain the absence of obvious descent tracks. Panic doesn't follow a clean path. Then there's a darker theory, though officials downplay it: foul play. There were no signs of a struggle, no missing items, no trauma identified publicly, but the complete silence around her descent. No one saw or heard anything, leaves room for unease. Lastly, there's the body itself. Could she have suffered a medical emergency? A stroke, a dizzy spell, a fainting moment that led to a fatal tumble? At 62, it's not impossible, but there's no confirmation of any pre-existing condition or medication. In the absence of answers, we're left with possibilities, and that's the most haunting part, because until the autopsy speaks, the only voice we have is the mountain, and it isn't saying a word. This story isn't just a tragic event on a faraway mountain. It strikes something deeper, something personal. Dr. Marites Buenafe was not reckless. She was a 62-year-old physician, a mother, a woman who had spent decades helping others heal. In her free time, she sought solitude in nature, not to escape, but to reconnect. She had hiked the Grand Canyon, Yosemite, national parks that demand preparation and respect. She was experienced, calm, and careful. And yet, even with all her knowledge, it wasn't enough. She planned her day. She informed her family. She chose a trail accessible by tram, a path taken by thousands, and still she vanished, only to be found 1,700 feet below the ridgeline in a place no one expected, with no explanation of how she got there. That's what makes this case resonate so deeply. It's not just about mystery, it's about fragility. Viewers watching this, especially women, solo travelers, older adventurers, will feel that gut punch, because Dr. Buenafe did everything right, and still something went wrong. This wasn't about carelessness. It was about the unpredictable, the silence of nature, the blind corners we all walk around, not knowing if they'll be the last. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Is experience really enough? Can you ever be truly prepared when you're alone out there? And how many other stories like this have ended without answers? Her death is not just a news item. It's a mirror, and the reflection it gives back is haunting. This isn't just an adventure gone wrong. It brings up serious questions about cruise line responsibility. The Norwegian Bliss left without Dr. Buenafe, and that raises a flag. When passengers disembark for excursions, especially solo hikes, how do cruise lines track their safety? Do they simply trust them to check in at the ship's gangway? Or are there systems in place to alert staff if someone doesn't return by a certain time? Industry insiders say protocols for solo hikers vary dramatically. Some cruise lines require guests to sign out and back in, but enforcement can be lax. Others rely on a mix of surveillance cameras at exit points, occasional power reminders, and hope no one slips through the cracks. It appears in this case that the ship crew didn't flag her absence until around 1:30 p.m., 30 minutes after departure time. That gap enough time for a fall raises the urgent question. Could an earlier alert have saved her? After declaring her missing, the cruise operator activated its care team to support her family. But the damage was done. She was already deep in the Alaska wilderness, isolated and ultimately out of reach. The aftermath underlines the uncomfortable truth: once passengers step off, cruise lines often lose real-time awareness of their whereabouts. That brings us to a tougher conversation. Should cruise operators be mandated to enforce much stricter check-in/checkout systems for solo adventurers, mandatory wristband scanners, mobile GPS tracking, or is that an invasion of freedom and privacy? This case might be the catalyst that redefines cruise safety measures, especially for older solo travelers who assume the cruise line has their back. The facts are in. The body has been found. The family is grieving. The cruise has moved on. And yet, the story still lingers in the fog above Juneau. Dr. Marites Buenafe left behind a life filled with purpose, discipline, and compassion. She boarded that ship not to vanish, but to witness the majesty of Alaska, to walk among the peaks and clouds, to feel small in a beautiful way. But instead, she became a question that may never be fully answered. She was discovered 1,700 feet below the trail. No one saw her fall. No one heard a scream. There were no footprints, no torn brush, no broken trees to trace her path. Just the stillness of the mountainside, as if the earth had quietly opened and closed again. Even now, the official explanation is cautious, likely an accident, but the silence surrounding the exact moment she disappeared, the absence of any direct cause, creates a vacuum where fear and imagination swirl. It's not about sensationalism, it's about closure, and right now there isn't any. For every hiker, every solo traveler, every person who's ever stood on the edge of a ridge and looked out over the world, this case touches something primal. That thin line between awe and danger, between wonder and finality. We may never know what truly happened in those final minutes. Whether it was a slip, a misstep, a moment of confusion, or something darker still hiding behind the trees. But we do know this: a woman went up that mountain and never came back. And somewhere on that cold slope beneath the clouds, the mountain still holds the truth.